First piece today will feature Eyal Bor on the clarinet, and this is a piece called Sholom Alekhem Rov Feidman by Bela Kovacs, a wonderful Hungarian clarinetist, one of the best of our generation, born in 1937. This really is a tribute to the tradition of klezmer clarinet, which we're going to hear a lot of in this program. This music rising out of the shtetls of Eastern Europe, the Ashkenazi Jews, and eventually makes its way across to America. And there it blends with the jazz coming up from the south to become really our American jazz. It also makes its way to Palestine as more people headed there. So it's become this wonderful universal music, and we'll also hear how it blends with the chants and the rituals of the synagogue and the liturgical music as we hear this first piece. Kovacs wrote this in 1980, and it's called Sholom Alekhem Rov Feidman, peace be with you, to Master Feidman. Feidman is Giora Feidman, one of the great clarinetists of his time, born in Buenos Aires in 1936. His Jewish parents had immigrated there, and then he eventually emigrates to become one of the youngest members of the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra in the 1950s. He's done many recordings, including playing on the film score of Schindler's List. Kovacs, the composer, has been a part of the Budapest Philharmonic Orchestra, the Franz Liszt Academy of Music, and was also the principal clarinetist of the Hungarian State Orchestra. So you'll hear in this piece this slow beginning, getting faster and faster, until at the end you'll want to get up and dance a little bit. So please enjoy Sholom Alekhem Rov Feidman by Bela Kovacs. Our next piece will feature our cellist, Francis Borowski, who will be playing Ernest Bloch's prayer from his suite Jewish Life that he writes in 1924. He actually wrote this piece while he was vacationing in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he wrote it for cellist Hans Kindler, who had earlier premiered his very famous Shlomo, his concerto for cello and orchestra that he wrote in 1917. And this piece really uses the liturgical modes, the Jewish modes, notably the Ahara Rabbah. Bloch was born in Geneva in 1880. And though he was from a Jewish family, they were not a very observant family. But he starts composing very early, at the age of 7. And he actually worked for a while in his father's business as a cuckoo clock and music box maker. Gets married in 1904, has a few children, including one who became Lucien, a very important photographer in America. Photographed a lot of Diego Rivera works in the Rockefeller Center. Around 1912, when he was appointed the professor of composition in Geneva, he began to rediscover his Jewish origin. As he says, he wrote to a friend, "I have just read the Bible, and an immense sense of pride surged in me. My entire being vibrated. It is a revelation. I found myself again a Jew. I raise my head proudly as a Jew." And he later, describing his Jewish period for the next 6 years, "I am a Jew and I aspire to write Jewish music, not for the sake of self-advertisement, but because I am sure that this is the only way in which I can produce music of vitality and significance, if I can do such a thing at all. I believe that those pages of my own in which I aim at my best are those in which I am almost most unmistakably racial, but the racial quality is not only in the folk themes, it is in myself. It is not my purpose, not my desire to attempt a reconstitution of Jewish music or to base my work on melodies more or less authentic. I am not an archaeologist. It is the Jewish soul that interests me, the complex, glowing, agitated soul that I feel vibrating throughout the Bible, the violence of the prophetic books, the savage love of justice, the despair of the preachers in Jerusalem, the sensuality of the Song of Songs. All this is in us, is in me, and it is the better part of me. It is all that I endeavor to hear in myself and to just transcribe in my music, the venerable emotion of the race that slumbers way down in our souls." Please welcome Francis Borowski, Ernest Bloch's prayer. Our next piece will feature violinist Emanuel Borowski and a wonderful piece, The Hebrew Melody by Joseph Achron, who was born in a small Lithuanian town in 1886. His father actually built him his first violin when he was 2 years old, and by the time he was 4, he had written his first few pieces. The family then moved to Warsaw so that he could attend the Warsaw Conservatory, and by the time he was 10, he was doing a concert tour of the Russian Empire and was dubbed the Wonder Child, performing for the Tsar's brother and more. He then enters the St. Petersburg Conservatory, where he studied with the renowned pedagogue Leopold Auer, who taught all the great violinists, Heifetz and Misha Elman. And again, he was not strongly Jewish as a young boy, but when he enters the St. Petersburg Conservatory, there's a society of Jewish folk music that gets started, and he gets invited to join the committee of that, and becomes sort of desires of developing a Jewish idiom. And in fact, he runs home after one of the first meetings in 1911, and he writes this Hebrew melody, one of the first pieces that he wrote, and remains to this day one of his most popular ones. Heifetz actually played this piece with his pianist Isidore Achron, the brother, in 1911. Ultimately, Achron would open up a new branch of this Jewish folk music society in Kharkov, where he taught at the conservatory, and he did extensive tours around Russia, ultimately moving to Berlin, and then later to Palestine, and then eventually making his way to America in 1924, where he taught at the Westchester Conservatory of Music, and then later in the 1930s out to Los Angeles, where he worked for a while in the film industry. The great Arnold Schoenberg wrote in the obituary about Achron, he said, "He is one of the most underrated modern composers. The originality and profound elaboration of his ideas guarantee that his works will last forever." Here's Emanuel Borowski, The Hebrew Melody by Joseph Achron. We're going to bring back Eyal for one last solo work. And this is a piece by Lev Kogan, a name that is very rarely heard. He was actually a Russian composer born in 1927 who ultimately moved to Israel in 1972. But he also was influenced by the Society for Jewish Folk Music in the Moscow chapter that had been started by Jacob Weinberg. He was a composition student of Aram Khachaturian at the Moscow State Conservatory between 1946 and 1952. And he was still able, even in the time of Stalin, to get some of this Jewish folk music out there, and began to discover and research Yiddish folk music. And by the time he moves to Israel, lives in Haifa, dies there in 2007, he had written many, many pieces. And this is a piece called the Hassidic Tunes for clarinet and piano. We're going to do 3 out of the 10 tunes that he wrote. This he wrote in 1980. Here is Dr. Bohr, Lev Kogan's Hassidic Tunes. next piece is by another composer that has largely been forgotten. His name is Joel Engel, although originally his name was Yulia Dmitrievich Engel, born in Ukraine in 1868. And he's really considered the father of the modern renaissance of Jewish music that began in the first part of the 20th century in Russia, in St. Petersburg, and began to spread. And this is what we're going to focus on for much of the rest of the concert. He really wanted to rediscover the Jewish roots of the music and to go back into the shtetl to write down, as an ethnomusicologist, some of this oral tradition music that was going to be lost. And in fact, he had gone to conservatory at the urging of Tchaikovsky, and he enters the Moscow Conservatory, and he worked with a guy named Vladimir Stasov, who was very influential in collecting Russian folk music. And Stasov was the one who said, "Where is the national pride in your own people?" Sort of getting that the switch to go off for Engel, that he needed to go and collect some of this Jewish folk music. And so he began around the year 1900 to go back to his village and write down some of these Yiddish folk melodies, and began a long lecture concert circuit around Moscow and St. Petersburg to make sure people heard this music. And in fact, he was one of the first to use the wax cylinders of Thomas Edison's recently invented phonograph. Much like Bartók did a few years earlier, he brought that out into all of these far-flung places of the Russian Empire and wrote down and recorded these Jewish folk artists. He was one of the founders of the Society for Jewish Folk Music that begins in 1908, which included some of the young stars of the time, Joseph Achron, who we heard, Piatigorsky on cello, Heifetz on violin, all played in some of these concerts to showcase this new music. He ultimately would move to Berlin for a few years, where he opened the Yuval Publishing House there, and then later went down to Palestine in 1924, where he taught at the Shulamit Music School and began to try to develop an indigenous style there, using some of the Yemenite melodies that he heard, and was one of the leaders of the first theater groups there in Palestine. It was difficult being down there. As he said, "I was pampered when I was in Moscow and Berlin. Here no one knows what Engel the composer wrote then and what he is writing now." And sadly he dies in 1927, and as I say, he's been largely forgotten, although for a while his music dominated the popular music scene in Palestine. You may even know some of his songs, Numi Numi, one of Israel's most popular lullabies, and Omrim Yeshna Eretz, among others. So we're going to play a trio that he wrote around 1911, right around this time, called Freilachs, the joyous music, and I think you'll hear some of that great Jewish folk music in it. Here is Joel Engel's Freilachs. We're going to bring two new people to the stage here, Dara Fitzgerald on violin and Radames Santos on viola, and do a larger work that was arranged and written by a living composer, Meira Warshauer, who is down in South Carolina right now. He teaches at Columbia College and is very much, lots of her output as a composer are Jewish themes and how they sort of relate to the universal message of healing and peace and struggle. As Ina Esther Just, who the principal cellist of the Jerusalem Symphony, observed, Meira's music comes from a place which is beyond music. It is like a prayer from deep within the soul and always evokes deep responses from the listeners. Now this piece that we're going to play, she wrote in 2001. It's called Yiddish Fantasy, and it's a fun work which includes several different tunes you will recognize, starting with Wo ist dus Geselle, Where's This Little Street, which takes us back to the shtetl, the little villages there in Eastern Europe. Then we go to Oyen Pripachuk on the Little Hearth, a very well-known piece composed by Mark Warshauer, where we can sort of look through the window at the children as they gather around the hearth. Then we go to Roshinkes mit Mandolin, Raisins and Almonds, a very famous work by Abe Goldfaden, a very popular lullaby, and then three dance tunes to finish it, a Russian Sher, and then two Freilachs to bring us home in this wonderful journey through the Yiddish music. So we thank Meira Warshauer for this wonderful piece, A Yiddish Fantasy. bring back Dr. Bohr and have him play with the full string quartet here while I take a little break and we hear this wonderful work by another composer who has largely been sadly forgotten, Alexander Krein, born in 1883, dies in 1951. And this is his piece called Jewish Sketches, Opus 12, that he writes in 1912. Krein came from a Klezmer family. His father was a well-known violinist who played all over, and there were seven other boys in the family who were all musicians, including his brother Gregory, a composer, and David, who was the concertmaster of the Bolshoi Ballet in Moscow for many years. Krein studies at the Moscow Conservatory, graduates in 1908, and he had developed this very original style combining the kind of new harmonic language of the Impressionists like Debussy and Ravel with Scriabin, one of the great Russian composers who was very inventive, and then combining that with some of the modes of Jewish folk music. And he met up with Joel Engel, the composer of that trio, and Engel was the one who encouraged him to write some of his own melodies with this klezmer tradition that he knew. And that's where this piece comes out of in 1910. And that uses both the Jewish folk, the klezmer music, and the kind of liturgical melodies. We'll hear that in the second movement, a beautiful cello solo in that. Krein never left the Soviet Union and wrote some kind of good propaganda music. In 1926, he wrote the Funeral Ode in Memory of Lenin, and in 1932, he wrote a symphonic piece called the USSR Shock Brigade of the World Proletariat. And he was awarded the title of Honored Artist of the Soviet Union in 1934. So it's kind of amazing that a Jewish composer could do that, but he sort of played the game as it needed to be played. His second symphony from 1945 is a very powerful meditation on the historic sufferings of the Jewish people from the ancient times all the way up to the Holocaust. So I urge you to look a little bit about Alexander Krein, and I hope you enjoy these Jewish sketches, 3 of them, Opus 12. Our final work on the program will bring everybody together on the stage at once. And this is the only piece on the program not actually written by a Jewish composer, but it's called the Overture on Hebrew Themes, and it's probably the most famous of the works, written by Sergei Prokofiev, who, though not Jewish, had gone to school with so many of these people interested in the Jewish music, and so was friends with them as students. And this piece was the result of an amazing convergence in America. In 1919, Prokofiev had come to do his opera, The Love for Three Oranges, in Chicago. And at the same time, there was a wonderful ensemble called the Zimro Ensemble, led by Simeon Bela, a very well-known clarinetist who would ultimately become the concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic for many years. But Bela had formed this group filled with a number of these young St. Petersburg students who were very interested in this Jewish music, and especially a Zionist sort of feel. And in fact, Zimro, coming from the word zmer, klezmer, meaning singing, their idea was to disseminate and collect Jewish folk music in Russia, and then to get all the income from concerts to fund the building of a cathedral of art in Palestine, and to establish this Palestinian conservatory. And so in 1918, after they were formed in Petrograd, what was St. Petersburg, they began a long tour going all the way to the east, to Siberia and Japan and Indonesia and Hawaii and Alaska, places, crazy places, ultimately across over to San Francisco and into Chicago, playing this music, and kind of amazed people who heard this in a real concert form. These were all phenomenal performers, and so not only they played more normal classical music, but added to this Jewish ensemble and made it really sound like it was meant to be part of the Western tradition. And it was in Chicago where they met up with Prokofiev, who heard them play at a Zionist convention there, and they sort of all got together, and we think that Bela said, I have some wonderful pieces in my notebook of klezmer tunes, maybe you could come up with something. And Prokofiev did put together two of these tunes, one which was more of a faster klezmer tune, and one kind of a more wedding song that was sung that had been collected by Bela. And here's Prokofiev's diary from 1920, talked about the premiere. He said, the premiere took place at the Bohemian Club in Chicago, which organized a reception for me on the occasion of this first performance of my overture on Jewish themes. It was a closed event, members only, about 80 people. Then the Zimro lot performed the Brahms clarinet quintet, which was serious and very boring. Then variations by Gnesis, Gnessen, which were the same as boring, and then my overture. The overture sounded quite fine after the previous dead numbers, and it was so lively and fresh that the auditorium came to life and gave me a vociferous ovation. And you'll really feel the excitement of this music, and we are really glad to be a part of this first Wednesday here at Beth El, and we hope you enjoy Prokofiev's Overture on the Hebrew themes.
Thank you.